Hello Vikings and welcome back. Today it was my intention to do a video on Deep Rock Galactic as Season 2 update dropped yesterday when I'm recording this. Thursday for you guys when you watch it. But nobody was really around because Thursdays they're just quiet apparently. So instead, we are doing another wishlist video, or continuing the wishlist series, so to say. We're doing American mediums and MBTs today. So spoiler alert, there isn't really any. There's a little bit MBT maybe. But yeah. Let's get into it. First up, we got this magnificent thing. The T6 medium tank. It was one of the proposed replacement prototypes for the M3 Lee, as the M3 was kind of outdated by the time it went into service, and very much just an interim design before the US could come up with something better. It initially shared a lot of features with its older brother. None of those really show on the picture. But through testing, it was revised and it was said to have a number of improvements made before it was accepted into, well, not into service, but accepted as the baseline for the production variant. The improvements included the removal of the M3 style cupola, which you can't see in the image. The sponson doors were to be removed, and the gun shields, well, a gun shield was supposed to be added, and if possible, it was to mount a 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun on the roof. After those improvements, the vehicle became the baseline for the M4, as we all know and probably have a hate-love relationship with in game. But yeah, the T6 is just the prototype of what became the Sherman. The specs of it is 5.6 meters long, full track chassis, obviously, it's a tank. 2.6 meters wide and 2.9 meters tall, weighing 27.2 ton. Powered by a Wright R975 9-cylinder radial engine, giving a top speed of 38.6 kilometers an hour. Armed with a 75mm M2 cannon, not the M3 that we get on the Sherman. It's also why the cannon has the big counterweight placed on the tip of the gun. In addition to that, it has a 7.62 M1919 mounted coaxially. It has one mounted in the M3 style commander cupola, and then it has two 7.62 M1919s fixed in the hull and one mounted in a ball mount in the hull as well. Crew is 5. It's the standard German layout. It's literally the tank that created the standard German layout, so no real surprise there. Next one, we have less of a vehicle, more of a modification for various vehicles we already have in game. We have the M4 Dozer, which is a blanket term for M4's mounting Dozer blades. The Dozer blade came as a kit. compatible with all the Sherman variants. Well, it came in 2 kits compatible with all Sherman variants. One had a hydraulic elevation mount as well. In game, probably shouldn't be all the Shermans that get it, but at least some of the Shermans should get it, or a new vehicle added, maybe with a Dozer blade attachment. The specs of it, I mean, it's standard Sherman mounting it, but the blade itself for the M1, the one without, well, for both of them, the height of the blade is 1.21 meters for the M1. The one without the hydraulics, the width is 3.14 meters. The M1A1 with the hydraulics, the width is 3.5 meters. The M1 adds 3.2 tons to the vehicle weight, and the M1A1 adds 3.3 tons to the vehicle weight. Yet another vehicle in the Sherman family. We got the the Sherman Whizbang, the T40 Whizbang. Fairly closely related to the Calliope, though some fairly important changes or differences. It was developed to aid in the D-Day invasion, for use for destroying fortifications and obstacles, but delayed testing prevented it being fielded before December 1944, so a bit late for that. The vehicles modified with this saw very limited combat in the European theater. They ended up in Italy and spent most of the time there. So yeah, not exactly a super common vehicle to see. The design of it is just a standard Sherman chassis. In the picture here, we got a M4 chassis, but it was also available on M4A1 chassis. Powered by the Continental R975 C1 9-cylinder radial, giving it a top speed of somewhere between 40 and 48 kilometers an hour. I suppose that's depending on what Sherman chassis it's on. The armament is, I mean, primarily the T40/M17 20-tube 180mm rocket launcher, the T40 Whizbang launcher, kind of where the whole vehicle gets its name. The rockets are fairly similar to the Hedgehogs on the Matilda Hedgehog. They are extremely slow, but fairly big and packs quite the punch. And to supplement it, it still has the 75mm M3 cannon. One point where it, besides the caliber of rockets, where it significantly differs from the Calliope is that the rocket pod on the Whizbang could be jettisoned if necessary, and it could continue to just operate as a standard Sherman. And once more, we got a crew of 5, standard Sherman layout, as the only real modification is outside the tank. Next up, we have a bit of a unique vehicle. Especially unique in the fact that it's built as a single prototype. The T105 Demolition tank. It was yet another attempt at making a dedicated engineering / demolition vehicle on the base of the Sherman. But a bunch of flaws and shortcomings in the design of the vehicle resulted in the cancellation of the entire project. It is, once again, it's a standard Sherman M4A1 hull, the cast hull. No changes in power plant either. The armament is the T105 180mm rocket launcher. It fires the same rockets as the Whizbang. It's essentially a single-fire rocket rail mounted in place of the gun. To So you load in a rocket, seal up the chamber, and fire the rocket from inside the tank, and the rails will guide it in the right direction. Fairly simple. Yeah, not a lot else to say about it. Yet another one-off prototype. We got the T69, and this is where we get more into some MBT territory. It was designed in parallel with the T57 and T58 heavy tank projects. The T69 was an attempt of mounting the what would become the 90mm M41 cannon, the gun used on the M48 pattern, with an autoloading system. The chassis was taken from the T42 project. This was the project for a tank intended to replace the M26 and M46, as those two were very heavily World War II inspired designs. But the outbreak of the Korean War meant that the turret from the new project was taken and mounted directly on the M46 hull, creating the M47. Sorry. The addition of the autoloader to the gun required a new oscillating turret, but due to reliability issues, the project never went past prototype stage. However, lessons learned from this project, as testing continued after it was cancelled, went into the T54 E1 that we already have in game. The design of the vehicle is, again, a fully tracked chassis. I mean, we're talking tanks. I don't think I've ever seen a medium tank on wheels. 8.1 meters long, 3.5 meters wide, and 2.8 meters tall, weighing in at 38 ton. Powered by an AOS 895-3 6-cylinder engine, giving it 500 horsepower and a top speed of 48 kilometers an hour. The gun is a 90mm T178 cannon. It is what would become the M41. Has an 8-round drum with a 30 round per minute reload, or fire rate, so 2 seconds per shell in the drum. I think that's going to be about the fastest autoloading, at least drum fed. As well as a 7.62 M1919 coax and a roof-mounted 50 cal. Crew of 3, as there's no need for a loader, and at this point the commander is also a radio operator. Last up for the US tanks in this batch is the M728A1 CEV. CEV is Combat Engineer Vehicle. It is the ultimate American demolition tank. The project was initially based on the T95 chassis, and later, as they were using an M60 turret anyway, it was designed to simply just mount on M60 hulls. And the project started all the way back at the end of World War II. The M728A1 is the last dedicated combat engineer vehicle, purpose-built combat engineer vehicle that the US used. There is still armored recovery vehicles and the like in service, of course, but they are generally just modified Abrams tanks. So this was the last purpose-built engineering vehicle, or combat engineer at least. The design of the vehicle, I mean, it's an M60. Fully tracked, 8.83 meters long, 3.66 meters wide, and 3.3 meters tall. Combat loaded, it weighs in at 48.3 tons. powered by a Continental AVDS 1790 2DR V12 twin-turbo diesel engine, giving it 750 horsepower and a top speed of 48 kilometers an hour. It's armed with a 165mm M135 gun, the US designation for the Royal Ordnance L9 Demolition gun that we have on the Centurion aviary in game, as well as a 7.62mm M240 coax and a 12.7mm M85 in the M19 cupola. Crew of 4, I mean, fairly standard. It does come with a mounted crane on the turret, which is the funny arms you can see sticking out of the side, but let's just keep that as is. Then we have the Canadian vehicles, starting off with the Ram Mk I. It was designed to meet the requirements of the Canadian military, though they were still part of the British Commonwealth at the time. Canada was initially initially tasked to be building Valentines for Britain. That was troublesome, as most of the parts and components came from British factories, and on top of that, the Valentine didn't really suit the doctrine or terrain of the Canadian countryside. All these factors led to the Canadian Tank Committee looking to the already outdated M3 Lee for an alternative, but it was decided that instead a new vehicle was to be designed using the M3 chassis. This led to the prototype Ram Mk I and the small first stage production batch of about 50 vehicles of the Ram Mk I. It was supposed to mount the 6-pounder, but neither the gun nor the mounting was ready, so the first vehicles were equipped with the 2-pounder. But we'll get more into that later. The Ram Mk I actually reached the Aberdeen Proving Grounds 3 months before the T6 Sherman prototype I mentioned earlier. But North American standardization of the M4 did in the end mean that the Ram was only used as a training vehicle. Design, we again got a fully tracked chassis. It is 5.8 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 2.67 meters tall. Fairly similar to the Sherman. Weighs in at 29 tons. Powered by a Continental R975 radial again, producing 400 horsepower and giving it a top speed of 40 kilometers an hour. It's armed with a 40mm QF 2-pounder and a coax 7.62mm, as well as a 7.62mm machine gun in an auxiliary turret, and provision to mount an additional 7.62mm machine gun on the roof. Further adding to the Ram, we got the Ram Mk II Late, not to be confused with the Ram Mk II we got in game, which is the earlier production variant. The Mk II Late is the last iteration of the Ram tank. The Mk II has a new hull, having removed the auxiliary turret, opting instead for a standard ball mount in the hull. As for the design, dimensions and power plant remain the same as the Mk I and early Mk II, but the armament is changed from the Mk III quick-firing 6-pounder to the Mk V quick-firing 6-pounder, a slightly longer barreled version. And as I already mentioned, the auxiliary turret MG is moved to the hull ball mount. I think I forgot to mention the crew on the last one, but they both have a crew of 5. And rounding out the hopeful Canadian line a little bit, we got the Grizzly Mk I. It is just the designation for the Canadian-built M4A1 Shermans. The only differences initially were some changes to stowages and radio. Later, though, different tracks and sprocket wheels were fitted that didn't require any rubber components, and that is the main difference visually on the outside. We once again got fully tracked chassis, 5.8 meters long, 2.26 meters wide, and 3 meters tall, weighing in at 30 tons. Once again, powered by the R975 radial, producing 400 horsepower and a subspeed of 39 kilometers an hour. Mounting the 75mm M3 cannon and a 7.62 M1919 coaxially, as well as one in the ball mount in the hull. And once again, standard crew layout, 5 crew. No real change there. And finally, as the highest, well, probably not actually. The Canadians did operate some Leopards. Maybe they should have those. Maybe not. Anyway, the final Canadian medium tank, we got the Grizzly Firefly. Small batch of the Grizzly tanks were refitted with the 76mm quick-firing 17-pounder in a similar manner to the standard Sherman Fireflies. However, the Grizzly variants were only used for training and never saw actual combat. The specs of the vehicle, the design of the hull is unchanged. It is, well, turret as well actually. It is unchanged. We still got a standard M4A1. Power plant is, once again, the R975 radial, no change there. Armament, already mentioned it. We got the 17-pounder replacing the 75mm M3 and no other changes. And once more, we got a crew of 5. Standard Sherman layout. I did briefly touch on the Leopard. We already have one of the Canadian Leopards in the German tree, and I honestly don't think that we need to add more researchable Leopards, least of all to the US tree. Plus, there is some more unique armored cars and labs and stuff that Canada could have at higher BRs instead of copy-paste vehicles. We're already very close to copy-paste with the Grizzlies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be having another one coming out. It's sometime, probably next week. Let's see. Don't forget to like, comment, and especially subscribe if you haven't already. Head over to my Discord if you have any vehicles you think I've missed or any information you think should be added. And yeah, I will see you in the next one.